بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله الأمين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته, and welcome to our first workshop on Umdatul Ahkaam, a book that has the title of Umdatul Ahkaam. And Ahkaam is the plural of Hukum, which is the ruling, the verdict. And that is why people ask, what is the Hukum on touching an impurity? So we say that it is forbidden, it is makruh, depending on the situation. So Umdah is the main pillar, the thing that most people look for, and it is the main thing. So Umdatul Ahkam is a book compiled by Abu Muhammad Abdul Ghani al-Jama'ili al-Maqdisi. Sometimes they call him Ibn Qudam al-Maqdisi. And this causes a confusion because there are a number of scholars, great scholars with the name of Ibn Qudam al-Maqdisi. And that is why they sometimes confuse this scholar with the compiler of the book known as Al-Mughni, which is one of the greatest and largest and most informative books of fiqh, especially on comparative fiqh, though the compiler or though the author was following the Hanbali madhab. And both were Hanbalis. Nevertheless, Umdatul Ahkam has great value. And why is that? First of all, it's 400 plus hadith. And what does that mean? It means that it is purely hadith. It is purely the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And this makes it far easier for us to relate to the hukum, to the ruling, to the verdict. I don't have to say this was backed by Imam so-and-so or Imam so-and-so. I'm taking it from the source, from the Quran and from the Sunnah. And that is why the easiest way to give fatwa is to quote a Quranic verse or a hadith. You don't dispute. Some people ask me, what's the ruling on a woman traveling without a mahram? I don't have to say scholar so-and-so and scholar so-and-so said. All what I have to do is, it is reported in the Sahih that the Prophet said, ﷺ, it is not lawful for a woman who believes in Allah and the Day of Judgment to travel without a mahram. The person asking the question says, yes, but Sheikh, so-and-so says so-and-so. I have no comment. I'm telling you, this is what the Prophet said, ﷺ. Are you looking for someone else? Therefore, this hadith gives you power because it directs you and it directs your thinking into what or how you should address questions regarding halal and haram, which means that this book is in the field of fiqh. And fiqh is jurisprudence. So it tells us the rulings, halal, haram, permissible, prohibited, how to do forms of worship, how to have different acts of transactions. This is fiqh. It does not deal with aqeedah. So it does not deal with tawheed. It does not deal with the hell and paradise. It does not deal with belief in general of angels, of messengers, of books, because this is another field of aqeedah. This is what you believe in. This has to do with halal and haram, rules, regulations, verdicts. It does not also deal with the Quran and the interpretation or the commentary on the Quran. It does not deal with akhlaq, with tarbiyah, with how to morally enhance your ethics, in the sense that this is the etiquette you should follow, and these are the things you should not do regarding etiquettes. It deals with halal and haram. This book has been widely accepted throughout the Muslim world, despite the school of thought, because though the author was, or the compiler was a Hanbali, following the Hanbali fiqh, however, due to the nature of the book, it does not involve anything of his own madhab. It involves authentic hadith. And the question that may arise is everything in this book authentic hadith, sahih? Are all the hadiths authentic? The compiler said that they are all from the sahih. And the majority of the hadiths we're going to study are agreed upon. What do we mean by agreed upon? It was narrated by Al-Bukhari and Muslim in the Sahih. And we always hear this wrong impression or the wrong description. We hear people say the 6 Sahih books. This is wrong. There are only 2 Sahih books, Bukhari and Muslim. And the other 4, Sunan, Abu Dawood, An-Nasa'i, At-Tirmidhi, and Ibn Majah, they include authentic and weak. And some may include even less than that. But the Bukhari and Muslim, the whole ummah of Ahlul Sunnah approve of them and accept them to have all authentic hadiths. So this book is one of the highest in degree of authenticity. Yet, this is the minimum requirement for any student of knowledge. And that is why this is not an advanced book. People usually, when they start studying hadith, that is related to fiqh. And one would say, what is the difference between hadith and fiqh? Hadith is the source of Islam, Quran and hadith. Fiqh is the understanding, the comprehension, the blessing and gift and favor of Allah upon those who are favored. The Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, whomever Allah wills him good, Allah would grant him the fiqh in Islam, in religion. So if you see someone who has this understanding, this comprehension, not only that, plus practice, then this is a person whom Allah Azza wa Jal has favored, whom Allah Azza wa Jal willed goodness for him. And if you see a Muslim who's rich, who's famous, but he is ignorant, he doesn't know the deen, then you know that Allah did not will good for that person. Now, scholars differed in the way they acquire knowledge. Some of them focused only on fiqh. So they collected the opinion of Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, Sufyan ibn Uyayna, or Qatada, or Ikrimah, or Mujahid, or the companions, Ibn Abbas on one school, Ibn Umar on the other school, and all the 7 fuqaha, jurors of Medina. They differed, but these people who concentrated on fiqh collected everything. And they had a vast, huge amount of knowledge. However, there is a lot of dispute and differences in these information they collected. And without the test, without the equation that we can filter this information, we will have a lot of trouble. And that is why Allah tells us, if you dispute in anything, what you do? Refer it back to Allah and to His Messenger. Meaning, refer it back to the Quran and the Sunnah. Otherwise, we will be in trouble. Why? Because what's the ruling on drinking? School A says haram. School B says halal. School C says makruh, not recommended. School D says it is highly recommended. I'm lost. What to do? Allah says, if you dispute, refer to the Quran and Sunnah. Let me cross-examine and know whether it is halal or haram, or recommended or not recommended. Now, without the knowledge of hadith, you're unable to do this. Because I can give you 100 hadiths, and you can get all the fiqh, all the rulings from them. But if they're all weak or fabricated, then you're building your religion on fabricated things. And that is why, without the knowledge of hadith, you will always find it difficult to know Islam properly. However, with only the knowledge of hadith, it will be difficult for you to understand the hadith without the fiqh, the tools of fiqh. So it is not a speciality that you have to take one and leave the other. A proper student of knowledge has to have a vast amount, a vast quantity, a vast knowledge of all sciences, so that he would be able to judge and to learn and to study. So, to go back to where we started, Umdatul Ahkaam is at the lowest level, meaning it's for beginners, and we're all beginners. We have a break. After the break, inshallah, we will continue on our topic between fiqh and hadith, so stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. So, if you want to study fiqh alone, pure, you go to the Hanbali school of thought, the Shafi'i, the Hanafi, the Maliki, and select one of the summarized books of fiqh. It tells you water is divided into 3 parts: tahur, tahir, najis, and they move on without mentioning to you where did they get this from, what's the evidence behind it. They only tell you that this is halal, haram, and move on. But this is not the right way of studying fiqh. Though it is one part. For a beginner, it's good that he goes through one school of thought, summarized book. Now, for those like you and me, who are interested only in the things that please Allah. Okay, this book of fiqh does not please Allah. It might be, it might not. Because I don't know if this is what Allah Azza wa Jal revealed or not. I don't know if this is what the Prophet ﷺ taught or not. I believe that 80% of it is authentic, it's right. But 20% may not be based on authentic evidence. So they follow another school of thought, and that is the school of thought of hadith. And this school of thought, definitely all the scholars, the great scholars, they are followers of a particular madhab. But they do not let their madhab come first. They let the Quran and Sunnah come first, following it through the guidelines of their madhab. And this hadith or this book is an illustration. If you open the book, you'll find that it's 420 plus hadiths. And it's all based under chapters. What do you mean by chapters? Fiqh is based under chapters. Hadith usually is based under either chapters of fiqh or narrators. So like the books of Musnadul Imam Ahmad, it's divided into narrators. So you have the Musnad of Abu Bakr, the Musnad of Umar, all the hadiths that Umar narrated, it's in one chapter. Then he moves to Abu Hurairah. Then you have Aisha, you have Anas. So regardless whether it's on fiqhi subjects or not, no. But this is what he narrated, may Allah be pleased with him, the companion. In the books of fiqh, based on hadith, no. They all begin with purity. They all begin with water, the types of water, utensils, because this is what you carry water in. And then they move into the second pillar of Islam, which is salat, prayer. So why did they start with water? Why did they start with utensils? Why did they start with water, skins, types of skins? Because at the time, the water containers were made of what? Skin. So what kind of skin is permissible for me to put water? And what is the use of that? Because this is related to the second pillar. The first pillar deals with aqeedah. It's not our topic. Al-kalima, the kalima, deals with the books of aqeedah. Here we focus on fiqh. So we begin with tahara. And this includes menses of women, menstruation. And this includes wudu, includes ghusl, includes purifying your clothes, your body, after answering the call of nature. How do you purify yourself? All of this is an introduction to prayer. Then they move to prayer, the second pillar of Islam. And they talk about the 5 prayers. They talk about the voluntary prayers. They talk about the prayers that are the Eidain, the Kusuf, the eclipse, asking Allah for water. And before all of that, they talk about timings, mawaqit. How do I know that the time of the prayer starts now or later? You have to identify this. And they go on until they finish everything related to prayer. How to pray it, prayer in congregation, forgetfulness, sujood, prostration, and a lot of things. Then they move to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th pillars of Islam regarding fasting, zakat, and hajj. After we finish, which is the most important thing for us to learn. Why? Because Allah created us to do what? To do what? To worship Him. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I have not, Allah says, created the jinn and the humans except to worship me. This is His command. Some may worship Him, some may not. Those who worship Him will go to paradise, those who refuse will go to hell. So, the book that deals with the 5 pillars of Islam is called the Book of Ibadat. Not that anything else is not part of worshipping Allah, but they're calling the forms of worship, the pillars of Islam, to be forms of worship. And then they move on to the book of transactions, al-mu'amalat. These are the categorization of fiqh books. And they start usually with buyur, sales. What is permissible for you to sell? What is not permissible for you to sell? What is haram to deal with, such as riba, such as najash, and we will go to all of this inshallah. To sell blindly, to buy without naming the price, anything that has disputes. Why? They said because if you prayed and learned how to worship Allah, you need to eat. And you cannot eat without buying. So they talk a lot about transactions, how to deal with others, how to sell in gold and silver, what is riba, what is interest, what are the types of forbidden forms of buying and selling. And then after that, some of them move and talk about food. Because we have food, we know how to buy food, what to do. I'd like to know the foods. And this means the types of slaughtering, the types of haram food, the types of things that I can consume and things I cannot. And then after a person has prayed and learned his deen and bought something and filled his stomach with, what would he think usually about? Marriage. So they talk about marriage, how to propose, how to get married, how to get divorced. After you get divorced, how to have iddah, the waiting period. And they move on and on and on, and usually these things lead to fights, disputes. So they talk about chapters dealing with blood, talking about injuries, talking about murders, prescribed punishment in Islam. So everything is connected. Now, Islam is huge, but it is simple. Because it's from Allah, because it's from our Creator, it is extremely simple. And as we, inshallah, will go through this great book, you will find that it is extremely simple for all of us to learn. However, this is, as I've said, for the beginners. So if you master this book, you're entitled, inshallah, to go to stage 2. And usually, scholars say that stage 2 is the book of Bulugh al-Maram, which was compiled by Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. May Allah have mercy on his soul. See, the beauty of hadith and the beauty of fiqh and the beauty of knowledge to students of knowledge is that the more knowledgeable they are, the more appreciative they are to the other schools of thought and respectful they are to the other scholars. We have a few minutes left, so we open the floor for any question related to the topic, inshallah, or a little bit off the topic is no problem. If I have the answer, I will answer it, inshallah. If I don't, I'll simply say, Allahu A'lam. So who would like to go for the first question? Yes, brother.
Sheikh, you mentioned that those ahadith that which deal with halal and haram, that is the jurisprudence, does not include the adab. So is that the case that the adab, the manners, does not include the halal and the haram adab?
Well, the halal and haram adabs definitely have to be mentioned there. For example, one would say, eating with my left hand or drinking with my left hand. What's the ruling on that? It's halal or haram. The majority say it is makruh. And the most authentic opinion, it is forbidden. So by etiquette, we meant to say that when entering a house, how many times should you ask for permission? 3 times. The sunnah is to say, Assalamu alaikum, adkhul, may I come? 3 times, nobody answers, you leave. So these are part of the etiquettes that usually the books of fiqh, especially these summarized versions, do not mention. It is mentioned in the widely expanded books. Why? Because it comes through this process and they collect anything that deals with these things, even makruh or mustahab. And Allah knows best. Yes, brother.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Assalamu
Sheikh, as you said that we should respect the scholars who have difference of opinion, but how to deal with those people who say that even after we show them a hadith, they say, no, our school of thought says this, our school of thought says that. So how do we deal with those people?
Well, it depends on their ability. And we always have to judge people in accordance to their ability, not to ours. So if I go to someone who is unable to walk for 10 meters without resting, it is unfair for me to ask him to jog for a kilometer. His ability does not take him. It's wrong for me to go to someone whose job description does not have or does not include solving problems. And I tell him, I have a problem, do this, do that, something that's complicated. These people you're talking about usually have a limitation. They say, and they believe, I only follow my school of thought because if I go a little bit higher, I'm confused and I may reject Islam. A'udhu billah. Why? He says, listen, there's so many differences. I'm unable to know. You have to look at the ability. Yes, if this individual whom I'm telling him, the hadith is authentic, and he says, I agree. I know Sahih al-Bukhari is authentic, but I don't want to follow it. I want to follow my madhab or my imam. This person is ignorant. Pray for him and don't waste your time with him. But if someone is unable to distinguish what's right and wrong, so always remind him, try to bring him to the authentic platform of Quran and Sunnah and tell him, okay, if you don't know, this is what Allah said in the Quran. And if you dispute in anything, return it back to Quran and to the Sunnah. If he agrees and complies, alhamdulillah, by time he will. I'm afraid that this is all the time we have. Until we meet next time, fi amanillah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.